morning, everyone. Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us back again. Welcome to Fit in the Cloud, the podcast series by AVM Cloud, a time company, the cloud for the enterprise. My name is Srinivas Rao, and I am the Chief Strategy Officer for AVM Cloud. Very excited to bring back the fifth episode of Fit into the Cloud. We have spoken about so many different aspects of cloud over the past few episodes, and today we are going to bring in something different. And I'm excited to bring this forward because we are speaking to one of our technology partners whom we've been established a partnership with them for quite a long while. And in fact, some of the major components of our cloud portfolio or cloud infrastructure is built around the technologies that is provided by this organization. And today we are going to speak about storage. Now, storage is less technology and more value for data, right? That is the whole concept of this particular episode. And let me not delay and bring up the person that's going to have this conversation with me from the organization called NetApp. Now, let me welcome Matt, who is the CTO for the APJ Cloud business in NetApp.
Hi, Shrini. Thanks for
Hey,
having me
Matt.
on.
Hey, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. Obviously, the CTO of APJ Cloud Business having a cloud conversation with AVM is good, but it's a little different. We're not going to speak about cloud, but we're going to speak about storage and its technology presence across cloud. And we are excited to have you here. So, like every other episode, let me do this. I normally don't introduce the guest myself. I let the guest introduce about themselves because that's how I introduce myself. I speak about myself. So, Matt, go on. Who is Matt?
Great.
Why are we speaking to Matt?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having us on. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Um, I've been in the IT game for a little over 20 years, which I guess puts an age on me. I started life as an electrical engineer and thought computers were really something I should get involved in. So I've been involved in data storage and infrastructure for many, many years and seen the three major trends that we've seen come through from individual infrastructure to virtualization and now moving into cloud. So I look after a team across APJ that specialize in our public cloud services and in our hybrid cloud services, and working with our partners like AVM to help realize some of the value that NetApp can bring to the conversation around data management and their hybrid multi-cloud.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. And we can't be more excited than this when it's about speaking about not just storage, because your experience really adds a lot of value in this conversation, I'm sure, right? To kick off this episode, I think it's great to speak about the trends across the storage landscape. What is the market view of storage really? And the storage has changed over a period of time. In fact, in my network of people around the professional network of people, there are a lot of people around storage area, and a lot of them will be very keen to know what am I talking about in storage in this episode. And I'm sure there will be a lot of feedback about it too, and a lot of them would agree and disagree about this. But I think it is great to start off with the 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 best aspect about putting the market landscape using Gartner's Magic Quadrant. And why I'm going to speak about Magic Quadrant is because all the organizations, let that be any customer, any organization for that matter, look at Gartner as one of those pieces where they're going to look who is doing well in within that particular technology domain space. And no surprises in that. NetApp is one of the leaders in the Magic Quadrant for primary storage, which was published as early as October 1st, 2021. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the assumptions when they took when they built this Magic Quadrant of late was, how is the IT storage administration done? What are the support activities? Is the support being replaced by managed storage as a service, which is a great thing that's coming up, right? A lot of percentage of people are looking at managed storage as a service, right? And also enterprise grade storage capacity. How are they being consumed? What are the offerings around it? Right? In fact, there are some numbers attached to it, like 40% of all premises IT storage administration and support activities will be replaced by managed storage as a service. which is a great increase from it's a great increase, 5% increase from previous years. And 70% of the corporate enterprise grade storage capacity will be deployed on a consumption base, which is again, increase. um, 30% of all enterprise storage arrays deployed to support primary storage workloads will adopt the latest of storage technologies like NVMe. Example, right? So these are great numbers when you look at it, and it's great to see NetApp being the leader. And I'm sure NetApp has been in the leader for the primary storage for quite some time. And because of the way you address different storage workloads across different kinds of your arrays, AFFs, FAS, solid fire, E series, EFs, cloud volumes, on tap, SGS offerings, so many different things. And obviously, your public cloud offerings have strengthened over a period of time. I speak about cloud managers, SnapMirror, cloud backups, a lot of things that you'll have brought across. And I think one of the biggest strength is really your data fabric strategy. The on tap software, which is the unified management platform, and obviously, y'all are also bringing the latest of storage media technology in with NVMe support and a lot of other things that are coming in. And not forgetting the shift that we spoke about from support activities to moving towards a managed
Mm.
storage as a service, where y'all are coming up with flexible consumption models and stuff like that,
Yep.
which is great. Now that I have told what I know about NetApp, what does Matt think about NetApp? What does Matt think and see how organizations or the market is viewing NetApp as? What are y'all? What is NetApp doing really?
Yeah, a great overview too. It's definitely that move towards managed services, that move towards abstracting value out of data as a focus rather than operating storage, right? So we're definitely seeing that trend in our customers and in our partners as well, and that's where folks like AVM really display their capabilities as well, further abstracting that to a consumption service. So there's probably 6 areas really that we're focusing on. Obviously, many years ago, NetApp made a fundamentally different proposition when it came to cloud compared to a lot of our traditional competitors. We see cloud, public cloud, service provider, and community cloud as an opportunity, and we've always seen that as an opportunity. And you've seen that, you mentioned ONTAP moving to cloud and all of the services that we have with the major big public clouds. So that continues to be a focus for us, and how we're delivering value to our customers as they move and incorporate public cloud into their ecosystem. Building private clouds and true service oriented architectures. That's obviously a big focus continuum for us. Moving towards more appliance and software defined delivery mechanisms is another area of focus. Consumption models, you said it before, this cycle of 3 years and then throwing your equipment out and buying new equipment, that has to break, right? We have to embrace this new economy, this new operational expense bound economy that we're in. And COVID has really taught us that our customers and our partners really need to embrace that operational expense kind of model, so that we can boom when we need to boom and reduce our operational costs when things are quiet, right? So COVID has been about, yes, control the costs, work from home, but when the demand comes back, we've got to be ready, right? We've got to be ready to accept that huge demand. So I think that's one area. And then the last 2 areas, we're very focused on the modern application move from VMs to containers and the challenges that brings. And we'll talk about that
We'll
later.
talk about it. Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
so that's a real important focus. And then our last one would be artificial intelligence and machine learning, advanced data pipelines, data lakes. That's probably our 6 key areas of focus.
That's a great visualization of the six areas because if you look at it, all of the six areas are very relevant to the market today. We, as a cloud provider, are very interested in what you all are doing in the NetApp data fabric space because that's where
Mhm.
you tie together your data protection, your cloud compute areas, your a lot of your storage related technology areas that you bring in, the control, the analytics, and so many different
Mm.
aspects that you bring in together around the data fabric layer. And obviously containerization, which we'll speak about probably very close to the end of this episode, a little more about it. But I think the major aspect that really isn't that is spoken about, especially from the cloud adoption days, is how is the data storage market changing, right? That is one of the key things. But before we get into the data storage market and how it is changing, how is NetApp doing as a company, right? Because those are things that you normally read it. You have to read a financial report to really understand. But this will be a great
Sure.
opportunity to hear it from you, who is the CTO of the whole cloud business. How are y'all doing in terms of numbers? Because
Yeah.
y'all are in the Magic Quadrant. Y'all are one of the leaders in the Magic Quadrant, which means there is stiff competition, and your numbers really have to be top notch to be coming out with more innovative stuff. So, how is NetApp doing in terms of financials?
Yeah, great question. And it's all great having these wonderful strategies and services, but unless it's really being taken up by our customers, I
Right.
take your point. So we have just closed our second quarter. I can't talk about those results, obviously, for obvious reasons. But we in Q1 we saw overall a net revenue growth year over year of 12%, which is pretty significant, I think personally. I know I'm the NetApp guy, so it's kind of natural for me to think, wow, this is great. But
Yeah.
um, certainly, if we look at the industry numbers, the industry CAGR for core storage and things like that is in the single digits,
Okay.
right? So for
Okay.
the business to grow 12% year over year, I think that shows that not only are we growing as an organization in line with expectations, but we're also taking market share, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that
Right.
that's important to us. Um,
Right.
we the cloud part of the business, my favorite part of the
Uh,
business, we've seen revenue growth 155% year over
That's
year,
impressive. That's
right?
impressive. I will really get to you to ask to know how y'all are doing that. But yeah,
It's
that's
working.
impressive. Really good job.
Yeah. Thank you, thank you. Praise from Caesar. It's just been wonderful to see triple-digit growth in our public cloud services quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter. So that strategy is really working, and I think it will continue to work into the future. And we're certainly seeing that confidence reflected in the share price. We just closed shy of $100 a share not so
Right.
long ago, which is
Wow.
fantastic.
I
So
wish I had some. I wish I had some invested in there. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
I
good.
think we're
That's good.
back down around the 91 or something now. But
Yeah.
yeah, certainly the confidence that we have in the business is being reflected in the market.
That's good. That's good. And your all flash array business, really, I think
Mm,
that's another piece, right? Because that is the latest trend in storage media, to be
mhm.
honest, right? And I believe, and I know for a fact that NetApp has invested heavily in the innovation of all this adoption of these latest storage media trends. And how is the all flash array business really doing for y'all?
Yeah, again, we're seeing double-digit growth. So in quarter one, we saw 23% growth
That's
in
awesome.
that part of our business, which is really a reflection. I mean, all flash is the standard, right?
Right. Right.
That's where the industry is at the moment. That's the
Right.
standard.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so we're pleased to see that continue at even better rates than
Right.
the market overall.
Right, right. So during the course of this episode, we're going to speak about media specifically in
Mm,
a little while because, like I told, storage is less technology and more of value for data. And the value for data
absolutely.
really comes from the kind of technology you use. Even though it is less of technology, it's still you need to know how you're going to use the technology that is available to give the value for the data. So we're going to speak heavily about it now. So, in this next part or next section of this episode, what we're going to speak about is how is the data storage market, like I told, right? How is the growth in the APAC region for the data storage market? And since you handle APJ business, I think this is something that you will appreciate and accept in a way. I'm going to throw up some numbers which I have pulled up from the internet, obviously. And for all our viewers, all the statistical numbers that I'm pulling up, I've not worked with any research consulting companies to uh, twist the numbers to project NetApp in a good way. It's just, or the market in a good way. It's just what is there on the internet. I'm speaking about those numbers. So what we see is the growth of the APAC next generation data storage market is attributed to a lot of increase in the unstructured data. We're going to speak about it because analytics plays a huge role in how you're going to use the unstructured data, which various industries are looking at, right? And there are so many technological advancements that are coming in to use this unstructured data and make it more useful. Now, from a market perspective, the expected growth, the projected is about 81 billion USD. That's a huge growth from 53.9 from last year.
Mm.
So in the next 5 years, we're expecting close to 30 billion growth in data storage market business. And you all would be very excited to see how much percentage of this growth that you all are going to capture, which is good. But again, to do that, this massive growth obviously is dependent on digital data volume, smartphones, how they are used, how is the advanced technologies being used, IoT. You spoke about AI. How are these being used? And and also, how are storage vendors really using or developing new products uh, based on the growth of the technology advancements that are happening in the market, right? So and one of the main I think one of the main contributions to this growth in the next 5 years would be the adoption of cloud services, and especially in the storage, data storage market space. How are organizations or customers and end users going to consume cloud services is going to be a great driving factor to get this 30 plus billion-dollar increase in the market space. Now, before I really ask you, how do you see the Asia Pacific region? I just want to hint at a particular number and then we speak about it. This is more of country specific. Um, uh, I'm sure you do cover India as a region, and I come from India, so I'm proud to say that. It is one of the fastest growing country in the region, because the cloud adoption has been insanely crazy in India for the past few years, and I can vouch for that. Technology advancements in India are at the speed of knots at this point, right? And that is catching up in the whole of Asia Pacific region if we look at it. Even in Southeast Asia, I mean, Singapore and Malaysia are not any behind. Malaysia, in fact, is making huge advancements in how cloud is being adopted, how advanced technologies are being adopted, and that is why I love this market because they're very aggressive about how to use the latest of technologies. Now, I would like to rather pick your brains. What do you think are the driving factors for the growth in the Asia Pacific region from a data storage market space? What are the main contributing factors?
I think it's quite diverse, and you hinted at each country slightly having a different sort of approach to digital trends and digital transformation. Certainly in India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, we're seeing a lot of different vectors growing those four in particular. If I look at Indonesia, energy and resources are very important to the Indonesian economy, and so a lot of that data is still being managed, it's still being kept, it's still being recalled. And it really leads to something that we'll talk about later, which is this two-speed data sort of economy where we want it fast when we want it and we want it slow when we don't. So we're controlling the cost. And I think energy data, subsurface data, and things like that is a classic example of that. So that's certainly one factor that we're seeing. The other big factor is smart manufacturing. Smart manufacturing is driving a lot of this as we're seeing data pushed out to the edge when we need it, and then pulled back into a cloud or into a core when we don't. So inferencing at the edge, for example, and then using advanced data pipelines to recreate models back in a cloud or core. And then I think the other one perhaps is a leading indicator rather than something that's particularly driving big numbers right now, and that's the startup culture. So the startup
Yes.
culture in India, that is really big, right?
Yes. Yes.
The
Yes.
government's getting behind it, banks are getting behind it, NetApp's getting behind it. We run at startup accelerators out of our Bangalore office in India.
That's
So I
nice.
think that's a leading indicator of what will happen with those startups is as they become mainstream, they
Correct.
will generate massive amounts of information.
Right, right, and actually, to be honest, even in Malaysia, the
Mm,
startup market is really improving, and it's improving at the speed of knots. Again, like in India, right? And the emergence of fintech is another contributing
yep.
factor, right? And they're able to use the latest of technologies to bring out stuff, and as they grow into bigger organizations, and when they are acquired and making all the dollars, they're also improving a lot of these businesses for us,
Yeah, absolutely.
which
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Definitely a huge contributing factor around that. And manufacturing, I can't say less about it. Industrial revolution here, 4.0 in Malaysia is also
Mm,
focusing on cloud adoption and a lot of these analytics, areas that are being focused on. So data becomes of the utmost value when we look
mm,
at all of these advancements in the market that are happening, and that's great. Now, before we get into the whole data aspect, let's step a few steps back and speak about what is the real storage devices and server market looking like. It's
mhm.
nice to speak about cloud. It's nice to speak about the latest in storage media technology, but we should never forget our roots that we come from, which is the basic server and storage market, right? And it's very interesting when I look at how the global computer storage devices and server markets are changing, right? Um, the Obviously the manufacturing is one of the pain points today, especially due to the current situation.
Mm,
But the increased data volume is definitely driving the technology providers like y'all and storage providers and server providers to come out to the market in some way or the other. Even during these times, y'all have made very good attempts in bringing out the required technology to the consumers, which is amazing, right? And this particular market is also expected to grow humongously. So the mainstream storage and server market is not going to die. A lot of people assume and speak about, since cloud adoption is there, the mainstream market is going to die, but that's not what market says, because a lot of organizations are very skeptical about moving everything to the cloud. They are saying not all eggs in the same basket, which
mhm.
means a lot of multi-hybrid cloud approach will be there, and that is where no physical devices or the traditional approach will still exist, and there's no way you're going to kill that market. And make no mistake, even public clouds run out of devices, so there needs to be
Yeah.
sold. Yeah, so they're expected to grow in terms of by 2022, this both these spaces are expected to grow to about 79 billion. But
Mhm,
again, if you take that number and look at the number from a data storage market space from 5 years projection perspective is 30 billion growth, and you can see that the servers are going to continue to grow. Probably that
mhm.
is where majority of the data storage market is moved into the hyperconverged space, which again I'm assuming that is why the server market looks a lot more lucrative today. Doesn't mean the storage market isn't. It's just that storage vendors like y'all are also moving into the hyperconverged space and providing storage in different forms, right? So that is expected, which is great. Now, the traditional model of server and storage, how much do you see it changing the aspect of cloud adoption or storage consumption from the cloud and stuff? Is that going to be a deterrent to organizations, or you're going to see continuous evolution of the normal storage still coming out to the market?
Oh, I definitely. We're still investing in our traditional business, and I think I don't see that slowing down. One of the beautiful things about NetApp is that any investment that we make in traditional data center kind of business is an investment in what we do in the cloud. because we are software driven, right? So we're a software driven data management company. It just happens that you can run it in cloud, you can run it inside your own data center on our devices or on your devices, right?
Correct.
So the saying goes, software is eating the world, and that's very true at a line of business aspect when we look at the Kubernetes and the microservices evolution, but it's also similarly true in the infrastructure world. In the infrastructure world, software defined was something that we talked about a lot, and I think the reality of that might not be exactly what we'd envisaged 5 years ago, but certainly the convergence of platforms and the implementation of software like data management software on as a software defined appliance or a software defined Helm sheet in Kubernetes deploying ONTAP that way. Those kinds of things are really defining the future of what you might call a traditional business. But certainly, we're not slowing down our investment in that part of the world.
And to be honest, I don't think so. It should even slow down because if you look at it, Asia Pacific is one of the largest contributors to the server and storage devices market in
Mm.
globally, right? And we this particular region is going to continue to contribute to that. And I think one of the major factors for this is big data. uh, Data keeps
Mhm.
growing, and until unless data keeps growing, you need the storage devices, you need the processing ability from the servers to do so. And so I don't I mean, I agree, I don't see this market going anywhere down, but I only see this adding on to the whole cloud models and the analytics models and making it more rampant in terms of consumption. Now,
Yeah.
yeah. Since we spoke about the traditional model, now I think I will kind of fast track it into the cloud world a little, right? Uh,
Sure.
w- uh, uh, so every data, I mean, every kind of data, whatever kind of data you look at, or any amount of data you look at, needs to be processed somewhere. It needs to be moved somewhere. It needs to be stored somewhere, and all of those somewhere could be on the edge, could be in the core, or could be in multi-cloud, could be anywhere, right? So. How does this really happen in the NetApp's world? How does this really happen? Because I know we use the same technology to ensure that
Mhm.
data is processed, moved, and stored in the right fashion. But in NetApp's world, how do you all process, move, and store data across the edge, across the core, across the multi-cloud?
Mhm. Yeah, great question. So for us, of course, automation is key, right? So we want your data at the right place, at the right time, at the right performance. And as applications become more complex and distributed, and as data becomes more voluminous and more distributed, we really need a machine driven approach to
Correct.
how we manage this kind of process. And so we have services. I won't talk to you about our services in particular, but essentially that philosophy of making data available at an edge cache, perhaps for inferencing by some smart manufacturing equipment, that's bringing changes back and logs back to this to a central location where we're rebuilding a model and then pushing that new model out to more locations. That kind of automation is pervasive across the way that we provide services to customers, be they in cloud, community clouds, or service providers. And I think automation is that fundamental tenet. It's fine to have a data fabric, but it can't be human driven, right?
Correct.
It needs to
Correct.
be machine driven.
Definitely, definitely. And automation is one of the main focus points, even for us as a cloud provider. And that is where I think with NetApp, we are doing some great stuff in terms of how do we ensure that our tenants on our public cloud are able to consume the data layer in a more automated way, not just from, even though we are powered by VMware, we can automate VM deployments and stuff. But storage also is on demand of,
Hmm.
now there were days when you could allocate a storage storage and sit on it for years and
Mhm.
wait for it to be consumed. But gone are those days. Now it is all demand based, and they really require it on the spot. So, and also the emergence of something that we're going to speak about later is containers and serverless aspects, or also bringing in the aspect of automation a lot more effectively into the infrastructure space. Now, obviously, when we speak about data and storage, we speak a lot about sovereignty. And that's
Mhm.
where I think we have a niche edge in the Malaysia market, because our data centers are located here. It serves the Malaysia data sovereignty aspect.
Mhm.
How does NetApp really do this on a public cloud space? How do you all address the data sovereignty aspect when you all work with public cloud providers? Again, I might be putting you on the spot.
No,
If you're
no,
fine to
no,
answer, that's okay.
that's fine. Of course, yeah, yeah. I'll talk about anything. So, sovereignty is a key concern, I think, for particular verticals, things like FSI, and certainly in the energy sector, sovereignty can become something of
Right.
national significance, right?
Correct. Correct.
Um, FSI is where we come across it very often. Defence as well is where we come across these kinds of concerns. And so I think the key about sovereignty, it's fine to create blanket policies
Right.
um, for sovereignty, but unless
Yes.
you know what data those policies apply to, it's a
Correct.
very difficult thing to manage.
Correct.
And so
Correct.
having community clouds, managed service providers like AVM that can provide that in-country assurity is
Right.
a fantastic thing. And you
Correct.
can connect out to public cloud and move customers' data around.
Correct.
Back to my point about automation, finding that data that needs to be compliant is a key requirement. And so we've
Correct.
built platforms that help customers automatically find that
Correct.
data in the data center, in the service provider, in the public cloud.
Right.
Because we can make a decision today, oh, there's nothing on that file share that's sovereign.
Right.
And then tomorrow, who knows what
Yes.
data ends up on that volume.
Correct.
And
Correct.
so automation again,
Correct.
reporting, and we've got platforms now that not only report but can take actions. Put something into your security operations center that says, "Hey, there's some non-compliant payment card data, seismic
Correct.
data, whatever it
Correct.
is, stored on this
Correct.
volume. You need to take action."
Right, right. And normally, when you are a cloud service provider, in our case, right, obviously, one of the key aspects is we don't, I mean, for the right reasons, we don't we don't have visibility into the kind of data. So it's very important to use the kind of technologies which we can give to our customers or present to our customers for them to be able to identify and apply policies around sovereignty and identify what kind of data needs to be visible or processed. And especially we being a cloud provider who is very appreciative of customers wanting to do a multi-cloud approach. If they're going to put their data, obviously it's right to put the data within the country, especially for regulated industries, compliance specific industries and stuff. When you put this data in a local data center on a local cloud provider, doesn't mean necessarily mean you cannot process the data from a public cloud service.
Right.
You will have to, right? But you need to know what kind of data needs to go out there. Now, this is where I think the use of storage technologies come into play, right? What Because it involves a lot of reads and writes across, especially with the
Mhm.
size and volume of data, which we're going to speak about in a while, about cost per terabyte kind of thing. But the size of data is really increasing, and with the different kinds of storage technologies coming into play, it helps the processing ability of this data. Example: if there is a customer who wants to store their data of humongous size on a cloud provider, when they store it, but their analytics and engine runs on a different cloud provider altogether,
Mhm.
the access required, in terms of storage access, the reads and writes that needs to happen real quick. And the cloud providers today, the kind of commitments they have to give is not anymore based on capacity. It's all based on how quickly can I access, and they want uniform level of service availabilities. And this is where storage technologies come into play. I've got a very interesting aspect of how the storage technologies adoption in the current storage infrastructure of many of the organization. How is it being adopted? What kind of storage technologies are being adopted? And I see cloud storage being one of the main things that a lot of organizations are looking at. In fact, close to 65% plus are telling that they use cloud storage, which could be in multiple different forms. Like it could be an enterprise file share mechanism. It's on the cloud. Nobody will put an enterprise file share on their on-prem and have all those things growing data growth and putting in capex investments on it. And the second one, surprisingly, they still continue to have HDDs, which means closely followed by flash, which means that is changing real quick. The HDDs are shrinking and the flash and SSDs are increasing over a period of time. But smartly though, software defined storage is something that's still taking time to pick up. And that's another very key aspect. It's surprising that organizations are willing to go to cloud storage, but not software defined storage. I'm a huge fan of software defined storage. I'm a huge fan of hyperconverged infrastructure, and it's surprising. And object storage is still work in progress. In my opinion, object storage will take some more time to get there. How do you see these storage technologies being adopted across APJ? Because I'm speaking from a Malaysia front, that today we see a move towards flash based. Everyone is asking for sub 5 millisecond or 2 millisecond latencies. They don't
Mhm.
care about tiered storages. If you give tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, they're like, I don't care. I want the same kind of access rights into the storage, same kind of reads and writes, same kind of IOPS levels. There is no control of IOPS they want. In fact, limiting the IOPS is not something that anyone appreciates today. There, and I think it's rightly so, because applications have become very dynamic. So when they are so dynamic, you can't expect the storage to limit themselves and not give them the IOPS. So how do you see these different storage technologies? Let that be flash, HDD. You can even speak about tape if you want, and your favorite NAS, which I'm sure NetApp. That's how people know NetApp as. But how are these changing in the other parts of the world?
Yeah, interesting question, and it's a very broad question.
Yes,
First, of course, I'd talk about data is a lot like fashion. It's hot when it's hot, and it's not when it's not. Right. So when we
correct,
want that
correct,
data, when we want to wear the new black, whatever it is, the new shirt or whatever it is, that we want it there, we want it fast, we want it available. But when we don't want it, when it's out of fashion, and that time between in fashion and out of fashion for data can be very short, right? It could be minutes, it could be days, but unlikely is it longer than that. Most surveys done in that part of the data realm have said that 3 days for unstructured data is about as hot as data will ever get. It will never get that hot again. And so
correct,
we need to control that cost. That's one lever. And we see that automated tiering to object. We
right.
really see that as something that's being adopted very broadly.
Okay,
Object is growing very fast. And things that are driving that, machine learning, artificial intelligence, life sciences is driving that, where we want to collect a lot of data, but we don't want to use it until we do, if that makes sense.
that
Even
definitely makes sense. Definitely makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
even in science, right? Things like the square kilometer array, you might have heard about square kilometer array. It's pulling in petabytes and petabytes every week. We're storing all of that data because at some point in the future, we might have sophisticated enough compute technology and algorithms to find something interesting in that data. And so we're keeping it forever, but we've got to drive the cost out of it. And so object, where I'm seeing big growth in object, really big growth in flash, absolutely. HDD is an interesting one. HDD, I think, will be replaced by QLC. So that
wow,
cheaper capacity storage, right?
correct,
HDD
correct,
will get replaced by that. But across the board, I think that whole segment is compressing down into probably performance flash, capacity flash, and object. I think
correct.
that's where we'll land, and then those mediums will be delivered with software-defined mechanisms. I think that's where that whole market eventually is going to land. Of course, we've got the tiny little sliver verticals of ultra high fast,
Correct.
high speed things using, uh, you know, um, S, I'm sorry, I've lost the not non-volatile
SRAMs,
non-volatile RAM, right?
SRAMs, yeah,
SRAMs and NV RAMs, that
correct,
sort of
correct,
thing. But that we need that stuff delivered so very close proximity to the compute. There
correct,
are some evolutions happening there with transports in NVMe that we'll talk about later that
right.
really make that viable in cloud as well as in data center.
Correct. I think that later could be even now because it was just kind of leading into the conversation for me about how data is processed, moved across server nodes, right?
Mhm.
How do we find the right balance of processing, moving, and storing for any of the workloads? How do we find the right balance? Because the kind of challenges that we see is, a bottleneck. For many of the workloads, they cannot process faster. Now, a lot of applications are coming with in-memory processing or network level processing and distributed processing across multiple servers. The data movement is not making it any easier to process this across all these layers. And the shift towards SSDs, like you said, internal memory being used, on all of that. Now, that brings me to the question of emerging storage media trends and the performance impacts of it when you see data being accessed in memory or across storage. Now, like you mentioned, SRAM, the performance is insanely good, right?
Mhm.
When you look at SRAM access, the caches, right? But at the same time, you did speak about HDDs being replaced by QLC NANDs, which is kept. They are capacity optimized, NAND storages. So now, how does someone go ahead and pick what is the right? You can't have everything in an environment. How does someone pick what is the right kind of technology to invest when it comes to processing, moving, and storing data for these diverse workloads that are coming into the organization?
Yeah, it is still a challenge, right? Isn't it? At one end, if I looked at something like a traditional genomics kind of workload, that is a traditionally a very large working set. It needs to be all, in memory would be ideal. Tens of thousands of GPUs would be ideal, but that's also a very easy problem to design for. We want to process this much in this amount of time, so we can design for that metric. What's more difficult to design for is these mixed workloads, right? That virtualization revolution has really delivered for us. So we think a application driven policy engine is the way that we address that. So if customers can settle on some kind of a reasonable investment, some kind of a reasonable performance pool, the smarts in the software should be able to carve out performance out of that pool for those applications when they need it. And so a
Correct.
dynamic software driven performance policy engine is really where I think customers are going to leverage the most from whatever media they invest in, be it
Correct.
NVMe, OF, the new NVMe TCP, SRAM, whatever it is that you're going to invest in. That's the media. The media
Correct.
is made intelligent by the software that runs on top of it. And so application driven infrastructures is really where we need to land with all of this stuff, because applications are becoming far more complicated and far more
Correct.
nuanced. And
Right.
we need to make business decisions
Right.
about what those applications get.
Correct, correct. And I think you're very right. Applications are becoming very dynamic. Their requirements are getting really aggressive. So it's a lot more decision that needs to be made. And now, normally, business decisions are made on dollar values.
Mhm,
There is a presumption that was applicable about a few years ago about cost per terabyte, right?
mhm.
Now, if you look at the latest cost per terabyte projections and see how they have evolved since 2014 and how they will look at 2023, is very small difference between an all flash or NAND based to a disk. the gap has
Mhm.
reduced incredibly, and at some point in time in 2023 they'll merge. The cost wouldn't be any different between a disk and a NAND flash, right?
Yep.
Yeah, tapes are pretty much going to die down at some point in time, and that's where object storage and a lot of these things will pick up. Now, your cost per terabyte, is that a conversation that organizations ask y'all? Because for us, it's a very heavy conversation, because there is still a traditional aspect when it comes to cost per terabyte is heavily spoken about, and they speak about IOPS limits, they speak about latencies, they speak about so many different things. But today, the latest technology is already reducing the gap between the older technology or storage media types to the latest storage media types, and the cost per terabyte is almost coming into a flat line. They're converging
Mm.
somewhere, right? And that's happening really soon. Actually, in the next couple of years, we might see that being the same cost, right? So, is that a conversation that, from a business perspective, when dollars are spoken about to you, is that something that customers are very concerned about, or they are more concerned about, or are they very comfortable with the technology that is being provided and the cost is not a big factor?
Oh no, cost is definitely definitely still a big factor.
Yeah,
I would say, and that's where I think just the automated tiering kind of thing, where you're talking about a blended cost per terabyte, and more the discussions with customers who are buying in that more traditional data center space, they're buying a blend of say 20% hot, 80% cold. And what's my blended cost per terabyte? Right? And then we put our storage
correct,
efficiency technologies on it that drives that cost down even further.
correct, right,
More sophisticated consumers, and especially folks that are looking at how we move big enterprise apps to cloud or service providers, are talking about IO density metrics. So IOPS per terabyte,
correct,
right?
correct,
And then if we extrapolate that to this discussion, dollars per IOP terabyte.
correct,
And that's a really interesting discussion,
correct,
right?
correct,
Right. Because now we're actually measure. If I looked at today in 2021, how many dollars per terabyte a hard drive is compared to NAND flash,
right,
there probably there's a big enough difference for me to
correct,
think to consider why would I use one over the other. But
correct,
when I look at IOPS terabytes and IO density measurement, flash will win every time, because in the fundamental boring metrics, if I think about a spinning hard drive, we're talking 140 IOPS or something like that per disk. If I think about a NAND flash, even with the flash translation layer and a SCSI interface, we're not even talking about NVMe. We're talking 7,000 to 10,000 IOPS per drive.
absolutely,
So
absolutely, yeah.
it's a bit of a nuanced discussion, and it depends what customers want to talk about.
Actually, that's something that we are speaking to customers about. It's not a capacity base; it's more of IOPS providing base,
Mm.
right? Because that makes a lot of sense. Even though you want to ask for a dynamic IOPS, if the software has got the ability to identify which workload needs more IOPS and is able to provide
Mhm.
that, then the cost tiering based on IOP makes a lot more sense than capacity based tiering, because earlier were the days when you used to add capacity to the IOPS and tier the cost based on it.
Yeah,
But now, gone are those days. Capacity is not a concern. It's
yeah,
more of an intelligent way of where the storage can do the IOPS provisioning to the respective workloads. Now,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that kind of brings me into the conversation of the latest of technology trends, which is containerization. Uh,
Mhm.
Heavily spoken about. It has changed the way the market is looking at developing applications coming out to the market, how quickly they come out to the market. There are so many things about stateless workloads, stateful workloads, uh, uh, API layers, web front ends, so many different things that are happening in the space of containers. People speak about Kubernetes specifically, but in the space of whole containers itself. And earlier there were the days of plugins. There used to be a storage
Mhm.
volume plugin that used to be there, right? Now, obviously, containers also followed that, and they call it the container storage interfaces. And
Mhm.
how they really put that plugin into the container engine. How do they bring up stateless workloads, stateful workloads? How do they orchestrate the storage for the containers to be able to use that? How do they get the database now database containerization is booming. There is a huge shift in container adoption. Databases are becoming a lot more lucrative to adopt in terms of containers. It's working well in terms of licenses and a lot of other aspects. And that is where I think, even from a traditional storage perspective, the way you assign storage to these databases has to be very dynamic. And how is NetApp doing uh, different, or NetApp, what is NetApp doing in this space to support the trend of containers in the market?
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely databases is one of those challenges. The CSI has or the container storage interface has become an industry standard. So for years, for many years now, even when Kubernetes first was coming to market, again, I'm pleased to say that we saw that as an emerging opportunity as well. We built software straight away for container-based applications running in Kubernetes to access persistent data volumes from our arrays. So they would self-provision, right? They'd self-provision persistent data. And often people say, well, it's containers, so they're ephemeral. They only sort of spin up and then they die. Isn't that the whole idea of containers? Well, you hit the nail on the head, Srini, when you said database platforms are moving to containers. Now you have to have persistent data
Correct.
if you're talking about the database layers.
Correct.
So that layer that we call Trident, that has been there forever on-prem. It now also works for cloud. And we've even taken extra steps. So we've built on top of all of this a SaaS-based platform that completely automates the protection, replication, provisioning of everything to do with persistent data inside the Kubernetes workspace. That's called Astra Control Center. We've got a cloud version, we've got an on-prem version. But because those, back to what I was saying before about applications becoming complex, data management, backup, archive, DR, that needs to be automated in the machine-driven world. We literally, we cannot have humans waiting for a help desk ticket when an application's being deployed if we're doing continuous deployment. We can't wait for a help desk ticket to
Correct.
provision a clone of production if we're doing
Correct.
continuous integration, right?
Correct.
We just can't, because that's
Yes.
happening
Yes.
every 15 minutes in some
Right. Right.
organizations.
Right. Right.
And so we really see, again, machines managing machines, application-driven infrastructures as the future, and no more is it more prevalent than in the container world in modern applications.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Again, in the interest of time, Matt, I wish we could continue having this conversation for a longer time and we could dwell into all of these areas a lot more.
Of
But in
course.
the interest of time, I think we need to head into the final section. This is where I normally ask my guest, what are the key takeaways for our viewers? This time, I would like to pose this question to you. Um, uh, how do customers plan for a multi-cloud ready storage infrastructure? How should they plan? Very briefly, I know you would want to speak about it for hours, and I would love to hear you. But I think very briefly, what are the key points that they should think about when they look at multi-cloud ready storage infrastructure? What are the architectural considerations when they want a resilient storage infrastructure for probably the same multi-cloud aspect? And the last one, I'll reserve it after you answer these two questions.
Okay, sure. So I'll keep it nice and simple and pointed. Years and years ago, the CIO of Warner Brothers actually came up with a concept called data gravity or data gravity. And I think when we look at multi-cloud, and especially when we look at hybrid multi-cloud, we talk about data fabric. Where your data is, there your apps will be.
Correct.
More apps means more data. More data
Correct.
means more apps. And in the data gravity concept, the data planet gets bigger and bigger, and it sucks more services and applications into its orbit. And in order to shift that data, you need a bigger and a bigger rocket, right,
Correct.
to get it out. And so we need to approach the multi-cloud, the hybrid cloud, in a way whereby we are able to achieve escape velocity very easily and quickly, because we need to respond to a very quick and evolving market. And so when you look at multi-cloud, having a universal data fabric and transport between your service providers, your public clouds, and your data center, I think is more important than ever. I think the second consideration is around automating that platform. So, what are the architectural considerations? Make sure it's machine driven, first of
Right.
all. And then for your medias, for your services underneath, the more abstracted those services can become, the more policy driven those services can become, even if they're in your data center. The more like a cloud that you behave in your own data center, the more value you'll get out of your infrastructure. Again,
Right.
back to that machines driving machines, right? So decide on an automated data layer and then create policies to manage that.
That's great. That's great, Matt. So if I understand you right, and if I hear you right, and what the viewers should be hearing this is, one, be ready to go out into the outer space, which is nice. But yeah, the more important part is focus on automation, machine-driven automation with policies, and the abstraction of the layers is very important. You don't put all eggs in the same basket. Don't look at one uniform data fabric layer. If you want to look at one uniform data fabric layer, ensure that you are clouded and policy driven out, which is great, and I think that's very important. Now, the real last point that I want to really get from NetApp and hear it from NetApp is how how are we going to strengthen our partnership to our customers in the local market, and obviously with our regional expansion plans, how do you see AVM growing into the regional aspect? How do you see NetApp contributing to AVM's growth?
Yeah, great, a great question, and thanks for the opportunity to come on and talk about our partnership together. And I think back to those key tenants that we just talked about. You've achieved that at AVM already, right? So you've already abstracted those service layers into policy-driven products that customers can buy. So you've achieved those objectives that I try, tried to define just now. Regional service providers and managed service providers are absolutely key for customers and key for NetApp, because there isn't ever, I don't, in my humble opinion, I don't think we're ever going to get to a point in time where the massive public clouds are going to satisfy every single requirement. And there's a
Right.
number of reasons. Sovereignty is the most obvious one. But the other ones that I find our partnerships with AVM Cloud deliver real value for customers is where a customer says, I really like your product, but I wish it could do this extra thing for us, right? Now, you're not going to get that personalized service. You're not going to get that attention from some of the larger hyperscale providers, right? You need to
Right.
bend as a customer to suit the industry standard, and so I think that is a real area of historical growth, and I see that as a projected area of growth as well. The other thing that AVM in particular is very good at doing is being agile, right? So not only from those customer requests, but seeing trends, getting ahead of them, creating value in those vacuums before they become mainstream things. And so things like AI as a service, things like big data as a service, data protection, high availability as a service, DevOps pipelines as a service, all of those things that are more emerging, more sort of out there kind of things. That's some real space to create value and really deliver some great objectives for our joint customers.
Thank you so much, Matt. I don't think so. Anyone with an AVM could probably project AVM that well. Thank you so much. And yes,
Too
you're
kind.
absolutely right. The way we do it is we are a cloud for the enterprise. Our focus is to ensure the enterprises are successful. What they don't get with the big players, we are able to customize it. And what we are doing is being ahead by adopting the latest technologies, bringing in all those aspects of latest technologies, and enabling that. We might not be big, but we do big stuff for customers, and that's what we take pride in. Again, thank you so much, Matt, for having this discussion and conversation with me. It was wonderful talking to you. Wish we had more, and I'm sure we will have a lot more with NetApp in the coming episodes, and looking forward for that. And thank you so much once again. And for the rest of our viewers, it's been a great conversation with Matt here, and we're going to continue to have more episodes coming up. Thanks to NetApp team for bringing in Matt to speak to me, and thank you for the partnership with NetApp. Look forward for many more episodes. Until then, see you. Take care.
Thanks so much, Srini.
Thank you.